In the Bible, Balm is designated by various names: Bosam, Besam, Sari or Sori, and Nataf, which all differ from the terms used in rabbinic literature. Now, it's actually up for debate whether Balm and Nataf were actually referring to the same thing, but come back to that later. This talk today is about the Balm of Gilead, the most famous incense tree of all time. Most people don't realize that when you read the Old Testament and it speaks of balm, it's actually talking about a legendary incense tree that was so rare and prized that its value at some points exceeded gold. In fact, the famous Roman historian Pliny the Elder documented that ancient balm of Gilead, also known as Judean balsam, at its peak price was sold by weight for twice its weight in gold. This made it the most expensive agricultural commodity in antiquity, a value driven by extreme scarcity. This occurred particularly after the Roman destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem. The Romans considered the crop so valuable that they paraded conquered balsam bushes through the streets of Rome as symbols of immense wealth. How could such an important tree possibly go extinct, and what led to this happening? All of this we shall explain soon, because today, it's not extinct. It never technically went extinct, but it kind of was forgotten about for 1,000 years. It was so rare that it was basically non-existent. Not extinct. It never went extinct, but it's sort of just, I don't know, people forgot about it almost. How could something so important, so rare, and so prized just be forgotten about? So let's go through this. Roman accounts highly prized it, precisely for its distinct aroma and anti-inflammatory properties, separating it from standard mastic or other kinds of normal incense. In describing Judea, Tacitus says that in all its productions it equals Italy, besides possessing the palm and the balsam. And that's in Histories 5-6. In Pompey, it was exhibited in the streets of Rome as one of the spoils of the newly conquered province in 65 BC, and one of the wonderful trees graced the triumph of Vespasian in 79 AD. During the invasion of Titus, 2 battles took place at the balsam groves in Jericho, the last being to prevent the Jews in their despairing frenzy from destroying the trees. Then they became public property, which means monopolized, and were placed under the protection of an imperial guard. But history does not record how long the 2 plantations survived. Okay, so that's what we know about balm. We know that Judea definitely possessed it, but it probably was present in Arabia and other places in the wild. But as far as people that actually traded in balm, were able to provide large amounts of it that they could actually trade with other people, it was Judea that were particularly known for this, okay? And basically, we know that they possessed it all the way up until the time around when the Second Temple was destroyed. And when the Second Temple was destroyed and the Romans totally took over the city of Jerusalem again, and kicked all the Jews out of it, around that time, around 70 AD, the Jews were trying, in a despairing frenzy, starting to destroy the trees because they didn't want the Romans to have them. So that's where we get to, and then the Romans possessed them and had them for a long time until the Muslims came. But we'll get to that in a little bit. So that's where we're at. That's where we know the trail leads. So Jeremiah writes, "The harvest is past, the summer is ended, and we are not saved. For the hurt of the daughter of my people I am hurt. I am black, astonishment hath taken hold on me. Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? Why then is not the health of the daughter of my people recovered?" So that's the famous passage, "Is there no balm in Gilead? Why are my people not recovered?" Today you may notice some people calling North American poplars or cottonwoods balm of Gilead, but this is unrelated to the historical balm. People started calling the cottonwood this during the westward expansion of the 18th and 19th centuries. European settlers gave them this name because the sticky, fragrant resin oozing from the tree's winter buds reminded people of the precious medicinal biblical ointment. And from what I know, cottonwood or poplar balm made from the buds of the trees is a very good healing ointment. That's another reason why they just started calling it balm of Gilead. According to Pliny, the balsam tree was indigenous only to Judea. However, it likely actually originated from Arabia and made its way to Judea, as it was known to Diodorus Siculus as a product of Arabia also. In any case, it was Judea who was known for being the main suppliers of balm in the ancient world. Even in Ezekiel 27:17, balm was one of the commodities listed which Hebrew merchants traded with the people of Tyre. It reads, "Judah and Israel traded with you. They exchanged wheat from Minnith and confections, honey, olive oil, and balm for your wares." So that's in Ezekiel, where you get this complex list. It's actually very interesting, showing what all the different countries were trading with Tyre, and so you can see what each of these countries mainly would have traded in. And balm is listed among the products traded with Judah. It's also mentioned in Genesis 37 in the story of Joseph when his brothers sell him into slavery. They do it on a caravan carrying balm, myrrh, and other spices. It reads, "So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing. And they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty, there was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, 'What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood.' His brothers agreed." So I think it's also interesting that it was Judah who was the one who tried to save Joseph, but it was also part of God's plan that that Joseph would go to Egypt in a way. So Judah then, being the righteous brother, saving Joseph, making the plan truly work, it's interesting that he's the one that is chosen to be the place where God puts his name forever. However, let's move on and continue with this discussion about balm. So also when Jacob dispatched his sons into Egypt, his present to the unknown ruler, which was actually Joseph, included a little balm. If you read that in Genesis 43:11. In the latter days of Jewish history, the neighborhood of Jericho was believed to be the only spot where the true balsam grew, and even there its culture was confined to 2 gardens, the one 20 acres in extent, the other much smaller. Also, according to Josephus, the Queen of Sheba brought the root of the balsam as a present to King Solomon. Pliny distinguishes 3 different species of this plant. The first with thin, capillaceous leaves, the second a crooked, scabrous shrub, and the third with smooth rind and of taller growth than the 2 former. He tells us that in general the balsam plant, a shrub, has the nearest resemblance to the grapevine. and its mode of cultivation is almost the same. The leaves, however, more closely resemble those of the rue, and the plant is an evergreen. Its height does not exceed 2 cubits. Also, I think it should be noted that whether this tree becomes a shrub or an actual tree, it has a lot to do whether it's damaged when it's young. So, like a normal myrrh tree, it can just grow into a normal tree, a normal small tree, but if it's damaged, then it becomes a shrub. So in the Talmud, balm appears as a valued ointment produced by the Jericho plain, but its main use was a topical medication. Young women also used it in perfume to seduce men. So here's the big question. How did it become forgotten or extinct and become basically a legend? As we already noted, when the Jews were conquered in 70 AD and kicked out of Jerusalem, in their frenzy, they started destroying the trees they didn't want the Romans to have them. So the Romans took over the royal groves. That's what we can call them, the royal groves, because of how valued they are. And they became state property, so they became a monopoly. However, around the time when the Muslims conquered the Middle East, this is what I was talking about before, because of the prolonged war, these tiny groves of sacred trees slowly went extinct or nearly extinct and forgotten. Basically, ultimately, what happened was that following the collapse of the Roman Empire, the local agricultural guilds were dismantled and the highly guarded cultivation secrets were lost. This is what one explanation that is given. It's usually said that by roughly 900 AD, the original plant vanished from the region completely, leaving its legendary value behind in scriptural and historical text. However, this is not entirely accurate, as it's said that in the 16th and 17th centuries, an Ottoman governor of Cairo in Egypt, brought 40 balm plants to the city's gardens. When the French explorer and botanist Pierre Balm traveled to Egypt in the mid-16th century, only 10 plants survived. Later, between 1580 to 1583, the Italian physician and botanist Prospero Alpini studied these surviving plants and published his observations in De Plantis Egypti Liber. By the 18th century, only one existed in Egypt, and by the 19th century, there appeared to be none. So what we basically have is somewhere between the 1500s and the 1600s, an Ottoman governor brings in 40 plants, but when the French explorer comes, only 10 plants survived. So also we have an Italian physician and botanist who documented and put down observations of these plants in his De Plantis Egypti Liber. So that's one of the main sources for what actually was this. So what was this legendary tree? Commiphora gileadensis. So that's what I've studied this out, and I'm almost positive that this is the correct identification, the Commiphora gileadensis. Although we don't know, it's usually pretty well accepted that it was the tree that was the legendary balm tree. So as we just noted, by roughly the early Islamic period, the famous Judean balm plantations had disappeared. Arab geographers mentioned that the true balm survived only around Heliopolis in Egypt and later disappeared there as well. So that would have been what we were just referencing, where the governor of Cairo brought 40 balms to Cairo in Egypt, and then they disappeared from there as well, kind of when you get up to the modern period. So for almost 1,000 years, people knew about the balm only from books. No living plant was available for comparison. That's sort of true. like I said, it did exist, but it sort of became forgotten in that 1,000-year period from 1,000 to today in 2,000 year of our Lord. So this changed, though, with some expeditions in the 1700s. The Swedish naturalist Peter Forsskål was sent to Arabia in the 1760s as part of the Danish Arabia expedition. So his assignment was partly to identify plants from antiquity. And while he was traveling in Yemen, he encountered a small aromatic tree whose resin was collected by cutting the bark. So not only did its appearance match many ancient descriptions of the Balm of Gilead, but its resin was famous locally. Its leaves were very aromatic, but most importantly, the local Arabs already regarded it as the ancient balsam tree. So Forsskål became convinced that he had rediscovered the famous balsam, and according to later accounts, he excitedly informed his mentor that he had finally identified the ancient Balm of Gilead tree. What a beautiful tree it is. It actually makes perfect sense that the Balm of Gilead would be a type of myrrh tree, as in the ancient world and even today, myrrh is extremely valued, not just for its healing properties, but for the amazing scent of its resin. Therefore, the idea that balm was actually the king of all myrrh trees, so to speak, does kind of seem plausible. So what's the real question is, though, why did the scholars accept it, that this discovery made by Forsskål, the Swedish naturalist? So several reasons made it seem convincing. It produces exactly the kind of resin that ancient writers describe. Okay, so the resin that it produces is exactly the same in description. It grows in southwest Arabia, which also is correct. It also fits the physical description of a small shrub. And also, ancient mosaics from the Byzantine period depict shrubs thought to represent the balsam plantations around Jericho. So the thing is about that is that's where we get the hint that the leaves are trifoliate. So in Commiphora gileadensis, the leaves are trifoliate. So that's another huge hint. And these mosaics gave us an actual picture of what the tree would have looked like. Furthermore, as we just noted, Prospero Alpini documented the balm tree in 1591. So his description is what is mainly used to figure out what this tree was, and his description perfectly matches that of Commiphora gileadensis. So it was actually Alpini's accounts that heavily contributed to the scientific verification of the species. The tree he observed was part of an ancient, highly protected grove in Egypt, descended from older Arabian varieties. So this remains a foundational text. Alpini's documentation in figuring out what the historical balm was in the modern Commiphora species. Another reason that it actually seems to fit the bill is that today it's impossible to buy resin from Commiphora gileadensis or the closely related Commiphora foliacea or foliacea, some call it. It's either foliacea or foliacea. At least in the U.S. today, Commiphora gileadensis, Commiphora foliacea, you can't get it, okay? You cannot buy resin from it, and it survives in the wild in Arabia and in other places, but it's still a very rare tree even today. So you just simply cannot buy it today. Much of the material cultivated I mean, much of the material from cultivated trees is used locally. So they just use it up. They don't sell it rather than export it. And there's only one plantation in the world known today, which is in Israel, of this Chamaephora gileadensis. But they only sell the essential oil, not the resin itself. And furthermore, their oil more than likely, although I don't know for sure, is more than likely not made from the resin, but from other aerial plant parts like the fruit, leaves, and twigs. So the fact that it's so hard to obtain today actually aligns well with the historical descriptions. Today, modern collectors struggle to find even a few grams of Chamaephora gileadensis, and that scarcity is very consistent with the picture painted by ancient sources. Some scholars, though, I can't explain this, but they want to ignore absolutely everything we know about the ancient balm tree historically, and try to say it's a different kind of tree, like a pistachio type tree. Okay. And this is literally just from descriptions of extraction methods. It's not based on anything concrete. There's no tradition to back this up. It doesn't fit the description of the tree. But it gets worse than that, because what they say, Pistachia lentiscus, it literally grows all over the entire Mediterranean basin. So it's literally impossible for this to be the ancient balm of Gilead, because the ancient balm of Gilead was, all the sources said it was incredibly rare, not something that growed all over the entire Mediterranean. So that just doesn't work. The plant was restricted geographically, cultivated only in royal plantations in Judea and in the Arabian Peninsula, like modern-day Yemen, southern Arabia, places like that. So also, another thing is balm of Gilead is said to produce a clear resin which turns red or a reddish color once it dries, which also makes it similar to several other varieties of Chamaephora, which also has a reddish colored type of resin after it dries. Chamaephora kua yields a translucent resin with a distinct reddish hue, and it's also sweet and fruity smelling, rather than more bitter like traditional myrrh, which is similar to what we read about the balm of Gilead. It's said to be very sweet smelling. Also, Chamaephora orneifolia, this only grows in Sumatra, the island of Sumatra, and it's very hard to obtain. It's very rare. It produces clear chunks alongside reddish tears. So some of the tears are more clear, like frankincense looking, and some are more reddish looking. There's also Chamaephora erythraea. Chamaephora erythraea, which is commonly called red myrrh. It's also related to what is called opanax or sweet myrrh, but it's not exactly the same as sweet myrrh, because normal sweet myrrh is Chamaephora guidoti. So Chamaephora guidoti, that's what, when you see something called sweet myrrh, that's not normal myrrh, and it's not actually Chamaephora erythraea. It's its own thing. It's Chamaephora guidoti, which I actually really don't like sweet myrrh that much, but that's just me. But apparently Chamaephora erythraea is something that's different from that, and it's actually known as red myrrh. So Chamaephora kua also has some trifoliate leaves, which is interesting. That Chamaephora kua, Chamaephora orneifolia, and Chamaephora gileadensis, they all grow on the island of Sumatra, and they're known for like a sweeter smelling type of myrrhs that are really pure and really valued. But today you can not buy Commiphora gileadensis resin anywhere. I think any resin that's obtained, it's probably used up locally. And there's just no plantations really of it that exist. The one that does exist is in Israel, and they more than likely, even the essential oil that they sell is likely not made from the resin, although we don't know for sure. So that's the story about the legendary Balm of Gilead. I hope you liked this talk. Stay tuned for another talk of fun facts with Clayton. God bless you guys. Love you all. You know who you are. Have a good day and worship the Lord, for he is worthy to be praised. Amen.